So picture this. You're sitting at your desk on a random Tuesday afternoon, and maybe you're eating lunch at your computer. Again. And you're doing that thing where you open up your banking app, stare at your savings balance for like 10 seconds, and then close it without actually doing anything. Just checking, like the numbers are going to rearrange themselves into something more reassuring if you look often enough. And somewhere in the back of your head, there's this low hum, this quiet, persistent anxiety that goes, "Am I behind? Am I the only one who doesn't have this figured out?" Because everywhere you turn, someone's telling you that you need $1 million to retire, or 2 million, or 3 million, depending on which article you last read, which was probably at midnight when you should have been sleeping. And instead of those articles making you feel informed and prepared, they just made you feel like you were already too late, even though you're not even entirely sure when too late is supposed to be. That little spiral, that's basically where I live. My name is Rick, and I spend an embarrassing amount of time thinking about money, specifically about the gap between what people are told about retirement and what's actually true when you dig into the math, the psychology, and the real-world behavior of people who actually manage to retire comfortably. I've talked to people who saved obsessively their whole lives and still feel broke in retirement, and I've met people who, by almost every conventional metric, should be behind. And yet, somehow, they're completely fine. And understanding that difference, that gap between the fear and the reality, is honestly one of the most useful things you can do for your own financial life. So today, we're going to talk about how much money you actually need to retire comfortably. Not the scary headline number, the real one. And more importantly, we're going to talk about why that number is so different for different people, why the standard advice is simultaneously right and completely useless, and what you can actually do with this information today, whether you're 28 or 52 or anywhere in between. This is going to shift how you think about all of it. Let's get into it. Okay, so you've probably heard the number, $1 million, maybe 2. It gets repeated constantly. In personal finance articles, in Reddit threads, in those slightly panicked conversations you have with coworkers in the break room. And look, it's not wrong exactly. It's just weirdly divorced from reality for most people. Here's the thing about that $1 million figure. It comes from a pretty reasonable place, a concept called the 4% rule, which basically says that if you withdraw 4% of your retirement savings each year, your portfolio has a very high probability of lasting 30 years or more. So, do the math backwards. If you need $40,000 a year to live, you need $1 million saved. If you need $80,000 a year, you need $2 million. Simple enough, right? But here's where it gets interesting. That math assumes your savings are your only income source in retirement. And for a huge number of people, that's just not true. Social Security exists. Pensions still exist for some people. Part-time work exists. Rental income exists. And the moment you introduce any of those variables into the equation, that giant, scary number starts shrinking. Sometimes dramatically. Let me give you a concrete example. Imagine someone who retires at 65 and receives $1,800 a month from Social Security, which, by the way, is pretty close to the average benefit. That's $21,600 a year. If that person needs $50,000 a year to live comfortably, they only need their savings to cover the remaining $28,400. Plug that into the 4% rule, and suddenly they need $710,000 instead of $1.25 million. That's a meaningful difference. That could be the difference between feeling hopelessly behind and feeling like you're actually on track. The point isn't that retirement is cheap or easy. The point is that the generic, context-free number people get handed is almost always either too high or too low for their actual life. And that matters because a lot of people look at that number, conclude they'll never get there, and just stop trying as hard, which is one of the more expensive psychological traps in personal finance. Here's something I find genuinely fascinating and also a little bit annoying. Almost nobody stops to define what comfortable retirement actually means to them before they start running the numbers. Like, we just kind of absorb this vague cultural image. Maybe it's a nice house somewhere warm, traveling a few times a year, going to dinner without worrying about the bill. And that image gets baked into our heads as the default. But that image might cost $90,000 a year for